we're back live from the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, East Tonto Trail, doing 5 days, 4 nights.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was exactly 2 years ago where we were on kind of the last backpacking trip of the Alaska to Chile trip.
Yeah. So we'll wrap it all up, give you some key takeaways, and tell you what's next.
Yeah. So we were a couple of years ago we were in Puerto Natales, and Udit and Johanna had just flown in, right? So we were prepping to do the O Trek, and then your parents and Angela were going to meet us for the second half of that and do the W.
Yep. So I think it was a quick bus ride up to the beginning of the O, and the first 2 days were ideal.
Yeah, we were like the second day, like laying on a beach, topless in the sun, beautiful flowers all around.
Yeah. There's something special about that part of Patagonia. Just for me, there's so many biomes you get to walk, and it's a relatively easy backpacking. There's like hot water everywhere. There's toilets. It's just very convenient.
Yeah, for sure. But then the third day, the weather took a turn for sure, and it was raining, it was snowing, it was cold. We found out my jacket that I had had for 20 years was no longer waterproof.
My brother didn't have gloves, and my shoes were starting to dig into my feet.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a little bit tough, but
and so I ended up wearing a trash bag, and thank goodness Udit had that trash bag.
Yeah.
Because on the fourth day we came over through that pass. That was like a 4,000 foot pass or something.
Yeah.
And I remember at sea level, the recorded wind gusts were 80 miles an hour.
Yeah, it got a little wild. It was pretty white out. The snow was coming down. I chose the book it tactic and just ran as fast as I could down the other side.
I was going a little slower, and was struggling when wind gusts would come. You just had to sit down.
You had to bunker
wait.
down. Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't stay on your feet. And at some point, I ran across this woman. I'm 180 pounds carrying a 40-pound pack. She was probably 110 pounds carrying a 40-pound pack. And she literally just couldn't stand up. And so I ended up like training with her. I'd bring the wind, and she was like grasping my pack, but we ended up just kind of like training through the pass to make it through.
Yeah.
And that was pretty sick. But yeah, once we were on the other side, we like made it down, got to see the glacier.
Glacier Gray.
So it's like
pretty.
Much more chill.
Yeah.
But then the next couple days it was still crazy windy.
Yeah.
And when we went to the ferry point, our parents, neither your parents nor Angela got off the ferry.
Yeah. They weren't on the first one. I was like, okay, fine, maybe they'll take the next one. They weren't on the next one. Another ferry came by, still weren't on it.
Well,
and the last ferry.
Yeah, the last ferry, the problem was there was only like 10 people on the last ferry, so it wasn't full.
Yeah.
And they weren't on that
I
either.
know. And so then we were like, uh-oh, where did my parents go? But the next day in the morning, they arrived. But because we were a little panicked, we went down to meet them at a certain campsite, maybe 8 miles away. They didn't show up, so I went back to get Justin and I's gear and then walked back down. So I had a 3X day, which was pretty fun, maybe like 21 to 24 miles or so.
And you held the fastest time on that segment for like a year, right?
Yeah. I actually didn't even know this, but on my way back, I had no weight, so I was just kind of booking it. And I was king of the mountain. I had the fastest Strava segment until maybe about a year ago, in which I got an email being like, "You're no longer king of the hill." And I was like, "I was king of the hill or something?" And I looked, and it was like that, a maybe 0.3 mile segment of that walk. I just booked it, I guess, and no one had ever thought about doing it kind of quick. But alas, my claim to fame is gone. But we're still able to regroup with everyone and kind of finish the last portion of it.
Yeah, and the weather thankfully was good for the whole group together. Yeah. Crossing those like suspension bridges was neat. There was a lot of pretty flowers, a bunch of wildlife. We saw a bunch of the like guanacos down there.
Yeah.
I got to eat them, so that was tasty. Had a good like New Year's Eve dinner.
Yeah. It was just nice. Yeah, it was nice to have the whole crew together, and it was a nice little capstone.
Yeah, perfect way to kind of wind it out. And then
Yeah.
we just headed back into town. I think it was like
Yep.
we all had flights out the next morning. So
Showered, had this delicious pizza. I still remember how
it's
good
the
that
only
pizza.
thing open.
Yeah, on New Year's Day, and then Justin headed back via Brazil. I went to Buenos Aires in Argentina, and had like 3 more weeks. I extended a little bit longer to see a friend, and then went home.
Yeah. And so overall, like, really amazing trip.
Yeah, I'm sick.
It was definitely like probably the most intense thing I'll do in my life.
For sure. Yeah, 14 months with one person day after day over. I couldn't have done it with anyone else. It was an absolute blast.
Yeah.
A lot of really good memories, and honestly, not that many bad ones.
No, not at all.
There were a couple things I look back on and being like, oh, wow, that was like a little tough. You know, we had a pretty like rough hostel in Honduras, and it was super hot, and like there was no fan or AC, and we were just kind of both laying there waiting to go scuba.
Yeah, I think neither of us are hot and humid climate.
Yeah, we're not beachy. We're mountain.
Yeah, more mountains. Like this weather, this was perfect. You know, the highs are in the 50s, the lows are kind of probably in the 20s or 30s. And yeah, you can always wear more clothes, so it's fine.
But you can't get rid of humidity.
Exactly. And I think what I learned too, especially contrasting like the trip in Chile where we had to book all 7 or 8 of those campgrounds almost a year ahead of time. And so we were locked into those dates versus kind of Mexico, Colombia, Peru.
Even Denali, right?
Yeah.
We made an 8-day trip in Denali 4 days because we're like, oh, we don't like the weather that's coming in.
Yeah, where you had unlimited freedom of where to go, when to do it, is like I really prefer having that freedom and flexibility around the weather because like the week that we got to Chile, the weather was amazing.
Yeah.
But we couldn't do the hike that week because all the campgrounds are booked and they're booked months in advance, and so we had to wait until the following week.
Yeah.
And it ended up good, but no, I definitely would trade off some of the like beauty for more freedom.
Yeah. And also I think it's like we would definitely give up like just the ability to have like, warm showers for the ability to have freedom. Like I feel like that was kind of the vibe of our trip, and this one was very much kind of locked in. But the upside was if you wanted a bottle of wine, you could just buy it while you were backpacking.
Right.
So like puts and takes.
And
Go ahead. My other takeaway was I think like reflecting on it when I was like 6 months into traveling, I was like, I never want to stop. Like this is incredible. I just want to find a way to do this forever. But I think by the time I got into like 9 or 10 or 11 months, it does start to take like a little bit of a toll in which like everything we saw was stunning and everything we saw was beautiful, but you start to like get a tiny bit jaded.
You lose perspective.
Yeah, you
right?
start to lose perspective, and you start to just become a little less grateful for all the things and the freedom that you do have. And so I do think like that was actually like the perfect amount of time for me to spend out and about. But yeah, it was an interesting tidbit.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so looking back at everywhere we went, I think we agree top 3 places or top 3 things were the ice caves in Alaska.
Yeah, the ice caves in Alaska were incredible.
Yeah, that air tour over Glacier Bay.
Yeah, that was the best $400 we've ever spent.
And Bolivia. Those were the 3 most stunning things.
Yes.
The funny thing, though, is I don't think either of us would go back and do any of that.
No.
They were all so remote and like difficult to get to, and kind of it feels like we've seen them and like we saw what Alaska had to offer, we saw what Bolivia had to offer. Whereas I think for me, especially like Peru and the Canadian Rockies are way more accessible. There's way more interesting stuff there, and I would go back to Colombia also in a heartbeat with like Jana.
I felt like in those, particularly Peru and the Canadian Rockies and Colombia too, I felt like we just scratched the surface and then we went away. While for Alaska, I felt like we did a really thorough job through Alaska. And I think even, and so just like, and through Central America, even though it was pretty quick, I do feel like
we saw
spent
what
a
there
bunch.
was to see.
you can see we're obviously mountain people. For the beachy people, I think Baja was sick.
Yeah.
And I also felt like even though we drove pretty much every like highway possible in Baja, there were still things in which I was like, wow, I would actually explore a little more.
Yeah, I actually went back to Baja and took Ken to
Yeah.
Baja. It was, that was so amazing. And so like, yeah, the beaches in Baja, I'm all about.
Yeah, and just the food is really good, and it's accessible, and it's great, and good vibes.
So yeah, what's next for you?
I got a job, which I love. I'm having a bunch of fun, and I'm starting to scheme the next adventure, which might be trying to sail from San Francisco to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii up to Glacier Bay to explore. I know we said we don't want to explore Alaska more, but Glacier Bay was just so stunning, and doing it from a boat might be pretty cool. So starting to work on a boat to maybe, and a friend to maybe get that going. But otherwise, just enjoying work and living in San Francisco and having a blast.
Yeah, nice.
And how about for you?
I'm 18 months into building my house, so cleared all the land, did all the steel building construction, and just finished the framing before coming on this trip. So now it's probably another several months to wrap that up. And then I will go back to work. So I think 14 months was enough time for you to be out of work. I think 5 years will be enough time for me to be out of work.
It's a spectrum, we're all different.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, looking forward to that. And I think looking forward to, and I have been enjoying, my time in Richmond, seeing friends again, getting to hang out.
Having a sink.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah, no, exactly. I've been living off grid I've been living off grid since the trip, and so I'm very much looking forward to having electric service again and hot water. But yeah, and just chilling, just kind of living life. So we'll see what it throws at us.
Sweet. I'm not sure when it'll be, but until next time.